Chaos Turbo Part 2. Hello everyone, it is me, Pui. I am on the way home from the place I was going when I recorded Chaos Turbo Part 1, and that means it is time for Part 2. So, let's talk about Chaos Turbo once again, specifically how to beat it, or more aptly, what cards can be used to improve the matchup. Part 1, if you do not remember, which you should definitely go watch it, link in the up there part. Part 1 was about the play patterns of Chaos Turbo, what cards they use, how they use them, what we need to keep an eye out for and identify to best figure out what they're trying to do at a given time so that they don't dick us over. But now, the new name of the game is, what cards do we use to dick them over? What matchups are good? What tools can we bring in the side? This is the more resolute stuff, the solid stuff, but unlike other decks, as I said before, there is no silver bullet. There is no one thing that just Turbo cannot handle, which is why it is kind of that tier 0.5 deck in this format. I'm not willing to call it tier 0, because there's things that can beat it pretty consistently, or at least consistently enough that the deck could be vulnerable again. But right now, at least at time of recording, we are at one of those moments again where Turbo is like 70% of the meta. The deck is beatable, but it doesn't have any magic bullets, so we just have to talk about, I don't know, lightly enchanted bullets, spicy bullets, things that we can do to improve, and how to play them to improve the matchup. Let's start out with the top 3 easy ones, and how to best play them and employ them. So, those are, number 1, Trap Dust Shoot. I'm going to say Trap Dust Shoot is up there probably as one of the best ones, because, again, in a matchup that is so focused on versatility and control over power, a matchup where it's mostly powerful players and good players playing it and who are relying on bluffing, if you get to look at their hand and take out whatever they need most, at least for a couple of turns, you're playing the game on easy mode. Turbo plays a high density of monsters. It is one of the deck's biggest weaknesses. The way it's designed, it has a lot of normal summons it's trying to do, and then a lot of other like supplemental cards like the Thunder Dragons, the Chaos Monsters, the Assailants, the Serpent. These are all stuff that stay in the hand. So they have big hands of monsters. That's a lot of time for Dust Shoot to be live, and a lot of options for whatever you think can hurt them the most to take. And then you have at least a couple turns generally to know exactly what's going on in their hand, which again, like I said before, when you can figure out when to best press Turbo and when to be patient until you have tools, that's when you're golden. So Dust Shoot's just like here, now you know, and that's really powerful. So I'm going to say Dust Shoot, very, very good tool against Turbo. Second best tool is going to be Kaiku. Second best tool is going to be Kaiku. Now Kaiku is a bit of a double-edged sword. Not exactly a double-edged sword, but there are going to be moments where he's useless. However, when he is useful, at his floor, when you summon a Kaiku, they must get rid of it, or at least put it face down or steal it, before they can do the thing that makes them win the game. They have ways to win the game without Chaos Monsters, but it's going to be difficult without a Kaiku. At its best, if a Kaiku hits your opponent, and they have Serpent in the graveyard, or if they have 2 or less Darks in the graveyard, or if they've already used a Thunder Dragon and there's only 2 Thunder Dragons in the graveyard, you cut them off of some really important stuff in one fell swoop. And sometimes they're just not going to have what they need to get rid of the Kaiku. Kaiku also is in a very important sweet spot for the deck, or against the deck, because Turbo has this weird little dip in power between 1600 and 2300. Their biggest monster before Chaos Sorcerer is a breaker with a counter on it at 1900, which generally that counter's not staying on for long. So really, Thunder Dragon, Virus, breaker, post counter, these all have 1600. Their next highest is 1400, then 1200, and then it just dips from there. They are not a battle-based deck, which means any loose monster sitting out on the board, I don't care if you're only dealing 200 damage, it's 200 Kaiku damage. You get to kneecap them hard. So if you're in a situation where they've, I don't know, maybe use the discard trap on something. They've put a Deco in attack mode and drawn it and attacked, and now Serpent's in the graveyard. If you can slam a Kaiku in that moment, you've kneecapped them real bad. Now the Serpent's gone, the Deco's dead, they've taken some damage, and they can't even use the Deco to Chaos Summon until they get rid of it. On the other hand, it gets walled out by Spy forever. It actually gets walled out by most stuff forever. So you definitely need to couple it with other things, such as our third biggest tool, Mind Control. This is the third obvious one. The deck is all flips and chaos monsters, except for 2 monsters that both have effects that can be used when mind controlled. So you take a flip, you flip it up, you get its effects. You take a chaos monster, banish target self, it's gone. If they Book of Moon it, you just flip it back up into attack position and activate again, because that's going to reset the effect. So there's nothing they can do about that. Mind Control, very strong. Mind Control, however, I'm putting third because it is the card that is the least autopilot, right? Most of the time, if you slam a Dust Shoot turn 1, you're on easy mode for a couple of turns. Sometimes you can try to be tricky if you think you're smart, if you think you have a play, if you think you know what they're going to do. But generally, if you play it and just slam it, it's going to be great. Mind Control, not so much. Like I said before, generally Turbo plays their flips in 3 phases, right? So you have the bluff phase, the spy phase, and the payoff phase. That's what we'll call them. And these phases are sort of based off what they're expecting your removal to be and how your play patterns are. So for starters, don't lock yourself in that mindset all the time, especially against good players. But it is generally worth noting the way that which they set these things, because in that first phase, that bluff phase, right? If it's a Deco and you mind control, you have an Upstart Goblin, right? That's pretty good. It can also be a Sangan, that's a straight -1. It can also be a Serp, that's a straight -1. It can also be a Spy, that's probably a straight -1. If you are playing Spy in your deck yourself, such as if you're playing a Turbo Mirror, that is a different story. However, then phase 2, again, that's the Spy phase. That's also not a very, very good phase to be using a mind control. We want to hold them. Phase 3, and I guess the pseudo phase 4, the chaos phase, that's when we really want to use our mind control. If we can help it, it is best to let our opponent not even know that we are running mind control until we've already used more standard flip hate, like a discard trap or a Nobleman of Crossout, to get rid of those weaker flips. Then once they finally set their real card, you mind control them, and that's real bad. Especially if you can get a Faith off of a mind control and get that mind control back. Now they can't really set another flip. They also can't Chaos Summon because you have a 1 card out to it. And they don't get their Faith effect. Or, even worse, you have a Trinity piece you've used already, and now you get to use that Trinity piece on them. So, really want to hold off on the mind control, but also be able to tell if your opponent knows if you have the mind control and might be flipping and setting that Faith earlier to try to trick you. You really, really need to try to get an idea of what kind of person you're dealing with, what kind of phase of the game, what sort of flips going on when, in order to use mind control. And so while it is definitely a very good include for just about any deck to be playing against Turbo, it is hardly an auto win or like an auto, I don't know. It doesn't smooth out the matchup just as well as Dust Shoot and Kaiku can, but it is definitely top on the list. The next thing we can talk about, good cards against Turbo. Just anything that gets rid of a monster and destroys a monster generically is going to be really strong against the deck. The deck is a very monster-based strategy with traps to supplement, I would say. On the converse, nothing is scarier than seeing Chaos Turbo with a bunch of sets, especially in this Solemn meta we have now. But when they are at their normal bread and butter, they're playing a bunch of monsters, they're setting monsters, and then eventually they're doing Chaos plus set monster, which is all really scary and nasty. But if we have a bunch of things that gets rid of their monsters, it's going to be much better. If you're playing your own discard traps, these are great. Keep them in. If you're playing any discard traps on the side, I don't know what deck you're playing, but those would be quite nice as well. Zaborg is going to be live very, very often against Chaos Turbo. Very, very strong card in this matchup. As well as Grand Marg is going to be great, though I don't recommend targeting a set, spell, or trap in this matchup. But if you're for some reason playing Grand Marg against Zaborg, it's going to be just as fine for sure. Blowback Dragon, very similarly. Cards like Tribute to the Doom, if you have the cards to afford such a thing, are going to be quite good. Nobleman is obviously at a premium, Exiled Force at a premium. Mystic Swordsman is at a premium. Even Tsuki Samurai number 4. Just the more ways that we can destroy a set without actually flipping it face up, the better. Because if we can just plow through their monsters, it's going to be much better for us and much easier for us to keep an even playing field and keep them on 1-for-1s. Easier said than done for sometimes, but if you can get something like a Kaiku and a Nobleman on the same turn and then get a clean attack in, that's going to be quite good. Especially considering when, again, it's a monster-based strategy and their sets aren't usually going to actually be meaningful resistance. So that's why it's important, again, to keep track of what kind of traps they're playing and when. Generally, though, just getting to interact with the monster and then attacking through it and getting to do that a couple of times and then stopping, like, the one spell or trap they have, that's a recipe for success right there. Next up, next most obvious choice that we can make against Turbo. Turbo, while being the best deck in GOAT format, as it seems, is also kind of the worst deck in GOAT format. And why is that? Because it is a slow monster-based strategy with incremental advantage that can't put up meaningful resistance to quick kills. The deck has a big weakness to quick kills. If you have a Trunade, a Mind Control, and something to put on lethal damage on turn 1, it is the deck least likely to be able to stop you from doing that thing and meme killing them on turn 1. Decks like Steingate are very good against Chaos Turbo. Decks like Cat are very good against Chaos Turbo, because both of these do have hands that go Trunade, Mind Control, lethal damage, 2-card combo, and if you just draw those cards, you win on turn 1. But as the game goes on, Turbo usually doesn't particularly have ways to stop them either, unless the players are smart or you're in game 2. The thing about GOAT format is that the best negate in the format costs half your life points, which for an OTK deck just makes your job even easier. You just have to half-ass the kill later. If they're going to solemn the first Cat or the Trunade or whatever, all of a sudden, the second Cat, or the first Cat even, now is going to deal way more damage, way easier. And this brings us to Panda, and why Panda has such a good Game 1 matchup, as well as Warrior, and why Warrior has a good Game Up matchup. So, the Panda versus Turbo matchup has been so good in the past, especially against a less experienced Turbo player, because the deck is very monster-based. They have a very little ability to get rid of their own items, especially when they're playing Phoenix Wing Wind Blast over Raigeki Break, which for every deck except Panda is quite ideal. Panda also is in a very interesting sweet spot where its sets are just as must-answerable and threatening and advantage-generating and powerful and defensive as Turbo's, except Turbo's usual plan to just ignore them and accrue advantage around them doesn't work as well, because Panda wants you to have a bunch of cards and will just clog you up so that most of the monsters aren't meaningful. They're not trying to win with attacks, so they never need to actually get around the board. Gravekeeper Spy is an inherent liability against Panda Burn. Obviously, I will say this before and I'll say it again, if you are keeping in more than one Spy against Panda Burn in Game 2, you're being stupid. I don't care what theory you have. Just bring in something else. You can meme walk the one Spy. It's fine. It will be fine. Just bring in something else, please. Really, their only tool are the Chaos monsters, and these are a very big tool for them. So as the Panda player, you need to especially watch more than ever to make sure that you're not giving them that dark unless you're in a position to get rid of the Chaos monster or win very soon after. Warrior, on the other hand, again, Warrior's monsters are all normal summons that all sit outside the range of Chaos Turbo's little dip, right? In order to attack over a Warrior meaningfully in this matchup, they need to summon a Chaos monster, and the deck is very good at answering a single threat. So fundamentally, Warrior has, I think, more threats and answers than Turbo has overall, and more ways to quickly simplify the game. Particularly, Warrior is the deck with the most main board answers to face downs, and I think this is quite on purpose. But your average Warrior build is going to play Nobleman of Crossout, Exiled Force, Mystic Swordsman, 1-2 Sasuke Samurai, and Blade Knight, And all of those are going to be searchable by Reinforcement of the Army, as well as Solemn Judgment to negate a flip that needs to be resolved, as well as Track Dust Chute. So, oh, and Kaiku. Warrior plays all three of the best cards against Turbo, potentially mainable or sideable, and gets to keep the tempo on while answering the sets just fine. Now, Turbo is perfectly aware of this plan, can play around it quite well, and also has plenty of ways to pivot the matchup to be more set-based in Game 2. But these are why the Game 1s are quite good for this deck. If you were wondering, in case you were winning without understanding, at least that is worthwhile. And lastly, the important thing to know about Turbo is its back row. Its back row is all, on the most part, weak, except it is chainable, which is its strength. So, cards that are not actually good against Turbo. Mystical Space Typhoon is not good against Turbo, unless you are saving your Mystical Space Typhoon set until they set a card on their end phase. You need to treat their sets like you do Panda Burns, right? You're not going to MST a random set against Panda Burn because it's just going to be burned, they're just going to chain it. The only difference is that it's not going to punish you by playing some end game floodgate the way that Panda will, but the principle is still the same. You will go minus if you are trying to randomly blind pop sets. You shouldn't be randomly trying to blind pop sets anyway, but especially not during this matchup. Once again, this is one of those moments of just getting good in general will help you with this matchup a ton. So if you were on the draw, then things like Dust Tornado are not great. But if you were on the play, things like Dust Tornado, Mystical Space Typhoon, Shingenhu, all of a sudden these cards are absolutely at a premium. Worth bringing in because you can surprise pop their sets before they have a chance to do the same back to you. We're going to want to bring in things that destroy monsters. We're going to bring in things that interact with the graveyard, such as Kaiku, Necro Valley, if you're deciding to do that, although I don't really recommend it, even if I did manage to do something with Gravekeeper Warriors one time. We're going to bring in our Dust Chutes. We're not going to bring in discard-based hand attack, but particularly Dust Chute, the way that it lets you look at the hand and shuffle something in, is quite helpful indeed. Quick OTKs can be good against Turbo. Decks with a lot of face-down hate can be good against Turbo, such as Warrior. And decks that can punish Turbo for being this bloated advantage machine the way Panda does can be good. I think a deck like Spatial Collapse comes to mind, although, again, they can get rid of a certain one card. So any sort of one card-based engine is going to be in trouble in the face of Regeki Breaker, and all of the normal face-down hate and back row hate as well. Let's talk about some things that actually aren't good. And this will be surprising. We'll name a couple of cards that are generally good against most decks that are actually quite bad against Turbo. So card number 1 is Delinquent Duo. If you were on the draw against Turbo, and you open a Delinquent Duo, and they go Thunder Dragon, Graceful Charity, and then the Graceful discards a Serpent and a Thunder Dragon, and they already have an Assailant in hand or whatever, their hand is quite padded against Duo before you even started. So for starters, if you get caught in this situation on the play, I highly recommend holding that Duo until they use a discard trap, or until they're at a point where they need those Thunder Dragons in their hand for some reason, or until you have a Kaiku to get rid of those Thunder Dragons and then immediately banish them afterwards. But otherwise, you're just going to basically let them get rid of their padding, and you're going to lose 1,000 life points. And so it's kind of just like a 1-for-1, but you took 1,000 damage for no reason. I would treat it as if you are playing Duo to get rid of the Thunder Dragons. Even if you could randomly hit something else, ask yourself, does getting rid of both Thunder Dragons help me right now in any way? And if the answer is no, don't play that Duo. If you're on the draw, just side out the Duo, especially if you have Dust Chute. Dust Chute's fundamentally better. Sure, it is only getting rid of one card, but it is getting rid of a card of your choice, and it is getting rid of that card for real. It might even get rid of that Thunder Dragon before they have a chance to use it, which is huge. Another card that is not great is Mirror Force. They are doing a lot of setting, a lot of inherent removal banishing. Generally, if you're at a point where Mirror Force is going to be a help for you, it's already too late. So, Mirror Force can generally go if you're trying to figure out what can be taken out. Torrential Tribute, No way, Jose. That is another way to answer their bloated board of sets. If they flip summon while they have a double spy and you torrential, you have managed to reset the board. God forbid you chaos and they banish a monster that you needed. You can destroy it so it actually goes to your graveyard and you can chaos back, which is great. MST on the draw, not so great unless you play it well. You can gladly take that out for better tools such as Mind Control or Dust Shoot. And Snatch Steal is not great because they play most of their game face down. Snatch Steal is not the worst in the world, but if you're playing Mind Control, that might be a bit better. So, I am home. That has been part 2 of how to beat Chaos Turbo. Hopefully this gives you an idea of what sort of cards and tools you can use for your decks. And what matchups you can try to play if you are really sick of Turbo and just want to try to jank them out. That is absolutely an option. It's something I did for quite a long time. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe if you want to know more about this lovely format or about anything else TCG related. Feel free to ask any questions, make any comments or any thoughts or suggestions in the comments below. And for now, I hope you have a lovely night. Bye-bye.